19-year-old Stephen Spade was born and raised in Mogador, Ohio. He graduated from Mogador High School, and in 2005, he was holding down 2 jobs, all while attending school for diesel mechanics. Stephen often found an escape in dealing and using meth. But he did have a desire to quit using one day, a desire he shared with one of his friends. He also had hopes of working aboard a cruise ship. But sadly, he was taken away from his desires, dreams, hopes, family, and friends in the most brutal way, in which he never saw coming. This is another Anabi Deep Dive. Please know that this content is for educational purposes and adults only. You can always find more information in the description section. Viewer discretion is advised. Now let's get into it. It was a snowy Friday afternoon in East Akron, Ohio. Stephen had just gotten to his friend Ryan's house. The two had been friends since 2nd grade, growing up together in Mogador, where they became Eagle Scouts and fixtures in their church's youth group. Though their lives took different routes after high school, they always remained close. Stephen was a year younger than Ryan, and after he moved out of his parents' home, he sort of leaned on Ryan, often crashing at his place and catching rides to school. On this afternoon, they were watching a movie, eating Taco Bell, and making plans for their Friday night. But then Stephen got a phone call. Some friends were getting a limo, going to Cleveland for a hotel party, and wanted to know if he wanted to come. Stephen accepted the invitation and extended one to Ryan. Ryan was going to tag along, but decided not to go because something just didn't seem right. He knew that drugs would be around and felt that that wasn't the type of party he needed to attend. Just before nightfall, Stephen's ride showed up. Though Ryan didn't join him, he invited another friend, William Kramer. Though William was older than Stephen, he relied on him for access to drugs and girls. Before heading to the meetup spot, Stephen and William stopped at the store, grabbed some beer, and then headed to 447 East Vorish Street. When they got to the home of Derek Shutt, a 43-year-old, heavy-set, tattooed-up guy, he was in the living room watching TV. Derek was also known as Little Man. Little Man had 2 roommates, Patrick Shane Rafferty and Lisa Penix. Patrick went by Shane. He was a 26-year-old divorced father of 3, who back then you might have thought was Pee Wee Herman's brother. He was born in Ohio but was raised in Baton Rouge by his mother. He was a 9th grade dropout that found his way back to Ohio to live with his father. Shane was a house framer and had recently moved into the Vorish Street home, where he could barely afford the cheap rent due to the lack of work in the winter months. Lisa Penix was renting a room upstairs. Lisa was actually Stephen Spade's cousin and connection to Little Man and Shane. 19-year-old Lisa had also grown up in Mogador. Though she had an innocent appearance, she too had a meth addiction, and her friends described her as a drama queen who told elaborate lies for sympathy. After high school, she started stripping. She was working and dancing at a strip joint named Flash Dance. This is where she met Derek and Shane. Derek worked as a doorman, while Shane was just there to flirt with the strippers and drink. Lisa and Shane dated briefly, but nothing came from it. They were nothing more than just friends with benefits at this point. When Shane moved into the Vorish Street home, he brought Lisa along with him. The party of 5 all hung out, drinking beer, but there was never no talk about going to Cleveland. By 10 that night, February 4th, 2005, another man arrived, Jason Keenan. He was there to drop off ink for Derek, who did tattoos on the side, and he had plans of giving his friends tattoos. Jason ended up sticking around and having a few drinks. At some point, Shane suggested they move the party to the basement so they could do meth. Everyone was down. They all followed Shane down to a small office in the basement. Shane pulls out a chair and tells Steven to sit down. Shane then grabs some duct tape and asked Steven if he could tape him to the chair, saying, "It's all about trust, right?" 19-year-old Steven agreed. His hands and feet were then taped together. What Steven didn't see coming was the punch to his face by Shane. "What the fuck was that for?" "You know what the fuck that was for," Shane replied as he continued to beat Steven, punching away his face and stomach. Nobody stepped in. Steven falls from the chair and he's dragged down the hallway in the direction of the bathroom. Shane then pulls Steven's cell phone from his pocket. He scrolled through the list of dial numbers and then he stopped. The screen read Lori. See, Shane shouted, waving Steven's phone in the faces of everybody else that was there. "He's fucking with my girl." Shane returned to beating Steven, then tells William Kramer to get your blows in. Remember, Steven and William are close. William barely knows Shane, but for whatever reason, he began to beat his friend. Then the two men drag Steven to the bathroom. His head is dunked in the toilet. He's strangled by his braided rope necklace. He struggles and kicks before he loses consciousness. Shane paused for a smoke break. After they put their cigarettes out, Shane asked Derek, aka Little Man, for his gun. And without a word, Derek pulled out a handgun from his pocket and gave it to Shane. Shane points the gun at Steven's head and shoots. Then he gives the gun back to Derek. "Give me your pocket knife," he commands Derek, who again complied. He dropped Steven's head in the toilet, allowing his blood to drain in the toilet bowl. As Steven's body lay limp, everyone went back upstairs for another beer. Not one person is panicking. Nobody tried to stop the attack, run away, or call the police, including Steven's own cousin, Lisa, and his friend, William, that he had invited. Jason Keenan eventually asked to leave because he had to pick up his girlfriend for work. He promised that he wouldn't say anything if he was allowed to leave. After Derek vouched for him, Jason was allowed to leave the house. See, what Steven didn't know is when he got to that house, Shane was acting as if nothing was wrong. But he really was upset with Steven because Shane had been seeing a girl named Lori who was a stripper at Flashdance, and he thought Steven was interested in her. He not only thought Steven was interested in Lori, he thought the two were involved, and he wasn't having that. After Jason left the house, the remaining four sat around drinking more beers while they decided what to do with Steven's body. And then one of the four suggested to sever Steven's head. A hacksaw was retrieved from Shane's vehicle and they headed back down to the basement bathroom. The three men took turns sawing off Steven's head while Lisa watched. Along with Steven's body, his cell phone, the hacksaw, and pocket knife were all wrapped up in black garbage bags. They then pulled Shane's car to the side of the house and loaded Steven's body into the trunk before changing clothes and leaving. Using the money that they found on Steven, they bought gas and made a quick run to McDonald's. They headed down 77 South, just past Canton, with William Kramer behind the steering wheel. Eventually, William and Derek switched. With Derek behind the wheel now, they continued their journey until they hit Mineral Wells, West Virginia. Around 6 a.m., they pulled off the highway to a BP gas station, where they used the bathroom and filled up a gas can. The sun was beginning to rise as they began scouting the frosted farmland. When they reached Butcher's Bend Road, they pulled off into an isolated field and parked. They pulled Shane's body from the trunk. And as the men doused him with gasoline, Lisa ripped off a corner of a McDonald's bag and lit it. The four stood there as Lisa threw the paper on her cousin's body. When they got back to Voy Street, it was a sunny Sunday morning, and they reportedly turned on cartoons. Later in the day, a farmer looked out his window, noticing the fire in the field, and called police. Wood County deputies arrived and discovered Stephen's smoldering body. Badly burned, they could only make out the flesh-colored soles of tennis shoes, his head placed by his feet. The hacksaw had melted into one of his elbows, and they were also able to make out his melted glasses and cell phone. Stephen's remains were transported to the medical examiner in Charleston, West Virginia. Making an identification was impossible. The only thing that they were 100% certain on was that he had been shot in the head and decapitated. Meanwhile, Lisa, Shane, William, and Derek were beginning their attempt at covering and cleaning what had taken place in that basement, wiping blood off walls, disposing of beer bottles, tearing up the carpet, emptying ashtrays. They even tore down ceiling tiles spotted with Stephen's blood. Lisa wiped down the steps, and Shane removed the toilet where Stephen's blood once filled and threw it in a creek in downtown Akron. They even attempted, reportedly, to go back to West Virginia to find Stephen's remains. Derek had called Jason Kennan back over to the house, and when he arrived, he was given the gun in a plastic bag and told to dispose of it. Jason rode around with that gun for 2 weeks until he tossed it in a dumpster at a car wash. After that, he barely communicated or saw anyone else from that house. And again, remember William Kramer. He didn't know these people before Stephen's murder. Now he was spending his days and nights with them. He had dropped out of school and was now living at the house. Stephen's murder was stalking his mind. He fell into heavy drug use. But eventually, he moved back in with his mother, and he too stopped talking to those that he had committed murder with. Stephen's good friend Ryan thought it was very weird that a week had gone by and Stephen hadn't showed up on his doorstep or called and asked for a ride. He tried calling him but got no answer. He even texted and got no reply. That Sunday, he ran into Stephen's father, Gene. He asked him if he had seen Stephen. The last time Gene had saw his son was Thursday, February 3rd, the day before he left Ryan's house with plans of going to Cleveland for a hotel party. Gene had gone up to the school to pay tuition and speak with Stephen's teachers, who had expressed concern after Stephen had missed several days of class. Gene tracked his son down and told him that he needed to straighten up, start studying, and keep his end of the bargain if he expected Dad to continue paying for schooling. Gene said he would be back the following Tuesday to see how Stephen had done on an upcoming exam. When he made that visit, Stephen's teachers reported that they hadn't seen him. Gene just thought his son was angry. He was tired of Mom and Dad's lectures, and he even thought his son might have left for Florida, something he always talked about doing. But by the end of the week, Gene became concerned. He called Ryan, who told him he at last heard that Stephen was going to a party in Cleveland with his cousin Lisa. A few days later, Gene ran into his nephew Eric, who was a Mogador police officer, and asked him to file a missing persons report. The only information he had was that Stephen had plans to attend the party with Lisa, who Gene hadn't seen since the year prior at a funeral. And then out of the blue, Lisa calls and leaves a message on Stephen's parents' answer machine. "I haven't seen Steve since the party that Friday," she said. She didn't leave a phone number, but she did call back a month later and left another message saying, "Just calling to see if you'd heard from Steve yet." Another out-of-the-blue call was made to a family member, but this time it was Shane. He had called his cousin Bob, who he hadn't spoken to in over a decade. Shane told Bob that he was remodeling his basement and needed a toilet and wanted to know where he could get one from. Of course, Bob was thrown off by this call. Why was Shane calling him after 10 years at 10:30 at night about a toilet? Though he was confused, Bob wanted to see his cousin, so he agreed to stop by. When he got to the home on Vorse Street, after sitting around talking about the old days, Shane takes him to the basement. Now, Bob was actually a carpenter, and he was dumbfounded by the renovations that he saw. Random parts of the walls had been sanded down. The concrete in the bathroom had been broken up with a sledgehammer. Ceiling tiles had been removed. It looked like somebody didn't know what they were doing. Bob would be in for another shock. His cousin Shane had confessed, telling him that a kid came over and that he had beaten him to death because he was a narc. Bob didn't believe him until Shane gave him a detailed account of the murder, from the beating to the shooting. As he gives Bob a play-by-play of the crime, Shane grabs a razor blade and starts chipping away at the wall. He said he was removing bits of brain. Bob played it as if he didn't care and that it was none of his business until he left and called his father. Bob's dad didn't believe this, and he suggested that if it was true, Bob should stay out of it and not call the police with 3 killers on the loose, worried about the safety of his family. Bob followed his dad's advice until May 25th, 2005. He arrived at his carpentry shop, finding a pile of junk sitting on the property. In that pile was a broken toilet, torn up carpet, a shower curtain, car keys, and clothes. Bob was convinced that Shane had left parts of the crime scene at his work in an attempt to pin this on him. This time, Bob called the police, and when they arrived, they discovered that the junk had actually belonged to someone else who worked at the shop. Bob still told them everything he knew, everything he had held in for 3 months. The only problem was that he didn't know the victim's name. He did provide the address. By the time detectives arrived at 447 East Vorris Street, it had already been abandoned. Lisa and Shane had split without paying Derek any rent. They stayed together for a short time before Shane fled back to Louisiana. And then in August, a hysterical Lisa Penix ran into her cousin at a gas station. The same cousin who was a police officer who filed the missing report on Stephen. Lisa had told him everything. Officer Brad called the detective who had been handling the case since Bob provided his statement in May. Lisa led Detective Hera to the murder scene, where she showed him exactly how her cousin was beaten, shot, and decapitated, and how they had cleaned up the scene. Afterwards, Lisa was allowed to leave. There was additional investigation necessary to confirm her story and, of course, identify Stephen's body in order to press charges. Just like Shane, Lisa soon disappeared. West Virginia authorities confirmed they had found an unidentified male who fit Stephen's description. 10 days after notifying Stephen's parents, dental records confirmed that the remains were those of 19-year-old Stephen Spade. When authorities located Jason Kennan, he confirmed Lisa's story. And by September 1st, Jason, Derek, and William were all arrested. Lisa was located and arrested in Montana, where she had hitched a ride from her lover, who was a trucker, and was also reportedly Shane Rafferty's father. All of them were charged with aggravated murder, kidnapping, tampering with evidence, and abuse of a corpse. In Baton Rouge, Shane learned his name was in the newspaper and gave Detective Hera a phone call. He denied murdering Stephen but agreed to return to Ohio, which he never did, blaming Hurricane Katrina for his absence. He was arrested in Louisiana and eventually brought back to Ohio. All of the suspects denied their usage of any drugs. Everyone except Shane said the motive was jealousy, highlighting the moment that Shane paused from beating Stephen to scroll through his phone, finding Lori's phone number, describing how he became more enraged. They all claimed that their cooperation was out of fear of Shane. There was really no reason for any of this to happen, and neither of them had an explanation that would hold over. William and Derek's denial didn't last long. They both pled guilty and received 25 years to life in prison. William Kramer, the friend turned foe, is serving out his time at the Marion Correctional Institution. His first parole hearing will be sometime in July of 2031. Uncertain of the date, Derek Shutt died in prison while serving out his sentence. Jason Kennan, the guy who showed up at the house at night with the ink for tattoos and disposed of the murder weapon, his charges were reduced to tampering with evidence and obstruction of justice, which he did plead guilty to. He served only a year of work release. Now Lisa, she claimed that she was innocent and took her victim theory to trial, which the jury did not buy into. On February 23, 2006, A jury found Lisa Penix guilty of all charges except for the firearm specification. She was sentenced to life in prison with the eligibility of parole after serving 23 years. Shane Rafferty denied it all. At his trial, he calmly testified that he'd had so much to drink that he passed out by the time of the murder. He claimed that the other four were pinning it on him, though he couldn't say why. Again, his jury did not believe his theory and found him guilty on all charges. His family's pain just might have saved him from the death penalty. 9 sobbing relatives all testified on his behalf at his sentencing hearing. They reminded the jury that he'd been a volunteer soccer coach, a skilled worker, a good father, and every time his children were mentioned, he would cry. When Shane took the stand, he apologized to the Spade family but took no responsibility for his part in Stephen's death. When it was time for Gene, Stephen's father, to speak, he stared down Shane, telling him, "I think it's fitting that you'd use the term, 'it's all about trust,'" Gene said. "And it is. But it's who you trust and what you trust. In February 2005, you sold your soul. You took Steve's life and body down to West Virginia, doused it in gas, and set him on fire. When your day comes for Satan to come and collect you, you're gonna feel every second of those flames, your flesh burning off your skin for all of eternity. It's all about trust. I trust in God." On April 4th, 2006, a judge imposed a sentence of life without parole for Patrick Shane Rafferty. Both he and Lisa have been unsuccessful with their appeals. Lisa has been quiet while serving her time. The last of any activity located from her was from a 2012 Facebook post searching for a pen pal where she wrote, "Could I be the girl you're looking for? If you like a down-to-earth person with a sense of humor, adventurous spirit, and positive attitude, look no further. Hi guys, my name is Lisa, and I'm a fun-loving 25-year-old from Akron, Ohio. Despite my current circumstances, I still have hopes of fulfilling my dreams and achieving my goals. One of my dreams is finding that unique man that is capable of overlooking my shortcomings as well as reveling in my assets. I'm looking forward to meeting someone unlike those of my past relationships, as they did not work out. Some qualities I admire in a man are honesty, confidence, stability, intelligence, and a good sense of humor. And although I was born a Yankee, I can't resist a man with Southern charm. A few things I enjoy are reading, photography, art, riding motorcycles, playing volleyball, music, traveling, and of course, the company of a good man. In my lifetime, I hope to outlive my past and leave behind a legacy that will make the world a better place. Please feel free to send a photo. It's nice to put a face to a name. If you could enclose an envelope, I'd appreciate. However, I'll do my best to respond to every letter. Hope to hear from you soon. Toodles, Lisa." Shane, on the other hand, has been very vocal in his belief that he was wrongfully convicted. He even has a Facebook page where he's plastered what he believes is evidence of his innocence. He also got remarried while in prison, his new wife also rallying for her man, believing that he did not kill Stephen.
Get people to look at it.
Take another look at the 2005 murder of Stephen Spade, a crime Patrick Shane Rafferty is serving life in prison for. A murder his wife says he had nothing to do with. She admits Spade was killed in the basement where her husband lived, but believes Rafferty was framed by his co-defendants in the case.
Pretty much every night he was drinking until he'd pass out after work. And it was the same that night as every other night. Drink until he passed out. And then after that was when everyone went down to the basement.
Today, on her husband's 43rd birthday, Shiloh Rafferty organized a rally to highlight what she calls wrongful convictions. Families sharing their stories. Conviction already upheld twice in the courts. He's now out of appeals. Rafferty now hoping the prosecutor's conviction review unit will take another look at the case and agree with the belief that keeps her going.
The fact that I know that it's not possible that he did it.
A man who said he was the victim's brother in this case watched today's rally. He didn't want to go on camera, but told me the 12 jurors in this case heard the evidence and made their decision.
This is what they give us for our sandwiches for dinner. And try to open it up so that you can see it. How nasty. Here is the sandwich. And I guess I'll have Malachi do it. This way I can. And yeah, just put it right in front of the camera. And you can see how the fucking bread, pardon my French. Yeah, look at that. And it's soaking wet. It's, hey, babe. So that's our sandwiches. It's dinner. So I guess I'm going to go and eat dinner. Love you.
Whether it was a meth-filled attack or behind a stripper that Stephen only met twice, who didn't even answer the phone for him when he called, Stephen did not deserve to lose his life in the manner that he did. I send condolences to the Spade family and love up above to Stephen Spade. May he continue to rest in peace.